Welcome to Knossos, traveler, where the Minotaur once prowled. Some say, if you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of the Minotaur's ferocious bellowing. Of course, it may only be a trick of the wind. Perhaps. Knossos was the seat of the old Minoan civilization, where King Minos once supposedly ruled. These ruins have been the backdrop for many important events in both history and mythology. Look for me when your visit is over, and we'll discuss what you've seen.
The island of Crete was first settled around 8000 BCE. Over time, significant towns and maritime trade began to develop. Palaces were built, destroyed, and then rebuilt, culminating in what archaeologists call the Neopalatial period, which began around 1700 BCE. This period lasted for over 300 years, and is considered the golden age of Minoan civilization. The largest palace of this period was located in Knossos and featured maze-like complexes of workshops, temples, courts, throne rooms, and living areas, as well as paved roads and advanced plumbing and draining. Trade and external relations were important to the Minoans, and their networks extended across the eastern Mediterranean. As a result, the people of Crete and the lands they traded with often influenced each other and exchanged ideas, usually through peaceful interactions instead of military conflict. The settlement of Knossos was established as early as the 7th millennium BCE. Today, one of the site's most notable landmarks is the palace ruins, located on the Kafala Hill. The ruins are split into two phases: the old palace, which has been poorly preserved, and the new palace. The new palace of Knossos had a surface area of approximately 13,000 square meters, making it the largest Minoan palace. Its focal point was a central court, which was probably used for ceremonial activities. The Minoan palace centers collapsed when Crete was overrun and conquered by a Mycenaean invasion from mainland Greece. However, the date of the final destruction of Knossos' palace is still unknown. During the new palace phase, the ground floor was dedicated to economic activities and contained large storage rooms. The residential quarters, which notably had toilets, were located southeast of the central court, at the foot of the grand staircase. The palace was lavishly decorated with wall paintings depicting things like bull-related sports and richly dressed women. Large stone horns of consecration, which were important Minoan religious symbols, hung prominently in the west court. Other notable parts of the palace include the theatrical area, which is believed to have served as a viewing space, the tripartite shrine, which was dedicated to the worship of an important Minoan deity historians refer to as the Mother Goddess, and the Piano Nobile, a grand space located on the palace's second floor. During his trips to Crete, archaeologist Arthur John Evans discovered several ancient tablets. They eventually led him to define the forms of Minoan writing known as Linear A and Linear B. The Minoans used these forms of writing for recording many things, including business transactions. For example, one clay tablet discovered at the Palace of Knossos was inscribed in Linear B script. The tablet detailed the transfer of coriander, often used in the perfume industry, between a man named Kyprios and another person named Twynon. The deciphering of tablets such as these has given historians great insight into many aspects of Minoan culture and society. According to myth, the half-man, half-bull Minotaur was born after Queen Pasiphae slept with a bull sent by the gods as punishment upon her. This embarrassed King Minos, but he could not bring himself to kill the Minotaur. Instead, he hid the monster in a labyrinth constructed by Daedalus. Daedalus was an important figure in Greek mythology, an ingenious inventor. He once became so jealous of his similarly clever nephew that he threw him from the top of the Athenian Acropolis. As a consequence, Daedalus was banished from Athens, though this did not prevent him from being able to get work. In Crete, he was hired by Queen Pasiphae to construct an artificial cowsuit that would allow her to seduce a bull she was particularly taken with due to a curse from the gods. Daedalus complied, and his invention helped facilitate the birth of the Minotaur. Afterwards, Minos conscripted Daedalus to build the labyrinth, presumably as penance for his role in creating the Minotaur. But perhaps the most well-known story about Daedalus involves his son, Icaros, who used wings built by his father and flew too close to the sun, thus plummeting into the sea. Sometime after the birth of the Minotaur, King Minos' son Androgeos was killed in Athens by the same bull that impregnated his mother. An infuriated Minos demanded that Athens send 7 of their noblest men and 7 of their most virtuous women to Knossos every year. After being carried to Crete aboard a ship with black sails, the men and women would then be cast into the labyrinth to be eaten by the Minotaur. One of the Athenian youths chosen to be imprisoned in the labyrinth, Theseus, had enough of the morbid ritual. Before leaving Athens, he proclaimed he would kill the Minotaur, then return to his city on a ship flying white sails. Before entering the labyrinth, Theseus met King Minos' daughter, Ariadne, who fell madly in love with him. Ariadne provided Theseus with a thread he could unravel to help him find his way back out of the maze. Armed with this thread, Theseus entered the labyrinth, killed the Minotaur, escaped the maze, and set sail for Athens with Ariadne by his side.
I see you found your way through the Maze of Ruins. The Minoans played a large part in shaping Greek myths, but also in introducing influences from other places and cultures. Now, what else would you like to do? Gladly. Follow me.
Welcome, wanderer, to one of the most prestigious places in Greece, the theater. I'd tell you, but I think it's best to let the actors speak for themselves. The theater was where audiences gathered to watch plays. They were the highest form of art in Greece, and people saw theater as a symbol of complete harmony between the mortal world and the divine. When you're done taking in the sights and sounds, come see me, and we'll talk more. Until then, wanderer.
Theater is not just part of geek culture, but was a major part of Greek culture. In Athens, comedies and dramas originated from the dancing and singing performed by members of the cult of Dionysus. Between 536 and 533 BCE, theater's burgeoning importance in Athens was demonstrated when the responsibility of organizing tragedies was entrusted to the Archon, the highest-ranking magistrate in the city. From then on, theater grew rapidly in popularity, and soon, a permanent space for performing and watching plays was built on the slope of the Acropolis. During the 5th century BCE, theater became intertwined with Athens' democracy. It often functioned as an echo chamber for political ideas, and in some cases, it could even influence public opinion. As a result, in the 4th century BCE, Plato coined the term theatrocracy to describe his city's politics. Theatrical competitions were held in the sanctuary of Dionysus Eleutherios, god of wine and patron of drama. Dionysus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Semele. Stories say that Zeus, who had fallen in love with Semele, appeared to her holding a lightning bolt in his hand. Semele was tragically struck dead by the lightning, but Zeus managed to save her unborn child, keeping the embryo in his thigh until it fully gestated. This is why the name Dionysus is sometimes thought to mean born twice. In Athens, theater was a part of the cult of Dionysus, and stage productions in the god's honor were held during festivals like the Linnaea and the Great Dionysia. In Athens, there were 3 festivals that honored Dionysus with drama performances: the rustic Dionysias, the Linnaea, and the Great Dionysia. For the rustic Dionysia, each deme of Attica organized their own Dionysiac procession. The parades were full of phallic songs, dances, and symbols meant to signify fertility, and participants wore drunkard masks and sang bawdy lyrics about the god. The Linnaea was the oldest Dionysian festival. It was exclusively reserved for Greek citizens and mostly made up of comedy performances. Finally, the Great Dionysia was the most important festival. Taking place over several days, it began with a parade called a Phallophori, followed by a dithyramb contest, and ending with consecrated drama competitions. The Great Dionysia was supervised by the head magistrate known as the Archon, who was assisted by 12 other magistrates. Among his duties, the Archon picked Chorigoi, rich Athenian citizens responsible for providing the budget for rehearsals and performances. 2 days before the Dionysia, a ceremony called the Proagon took place where playwrights introduced their work. The Dionysia finally began in earnest with a procession to the god's temple, followed by sacrifices and a symposium. The next 2 days centered on dithyramb contests, while the final 4 days were dedicated to drama competitions. The contests' outcomes were decided by 10 judges, who were appointed at random by the Archon. The judges placed their votes in an urn, and 5 of the votes were randomly picked to determine the winner. All Athenian stage actors were male, regardless of whether they were playing men or women. Tragedies originally featured only one actor performing alongside a chorus, eventually reaching a maximum of 4. Adding more roles opened up the opportunity for dramatic dialogue. During performances, they prepared themselves in the skene, a building that served as a backstage area, before emerging onto the proskenion, or stage. The skene could be painted to represent backdrops like palaces, temples, and tombs. Its roof was reserved for appearances by the gods. These gods could be moved around with a crane called a mechane, which produced spectacular visual effects. On stage, actors wore masks and elaborate costumes. For tragedies, they were adorned with magnificent clothes. While for comedies, actors playing male characters wore hugely exaggerated phalluses, probably to maximize the laughs. The centerpiece of the theater was the orchestra, or dancing place. It was a large, circular area that hosted choral performances, religious rites, and, presumably, acting. Choruses were composed of men wearing masks and costumes. Any Athenian citizen could be choratai, as long as they were selected by the chorus director. Chorus members also served as the equivalent of a curtain, as their entrance and exit marked the beginning and end of the play. New costumes and masks were produced for the chorus for every new play, and they were often just as impressive and elaborate as the performances. For example, Aristophanes' comedies feature the chorus dressing as wasps, frogs, birds, clouds, and islands. One of his plays, The Knights, even had men riding other men dressed as horses. Athens' Theatron, or performance space, could seat up to 17,000 people, nearly a tenth of the population of Attica. Its excellent acoustics made it ideal for drama, but it was also sometimes used for political meetings and parades. The theater was accessible to everybody. This did not mean that seating was free, though. The first rows were normally where priests and public officials sat, while the central part of the auditorium was reserved for ambassadors and guests of honor. There is also evidence that men and women sat separately. In general, theater audiences were emotional and noisy. During performances, they would shout, curse, and throw things depending on their mood, and their reactions were just as much a part of the experience as the acting.
Hello again, Wanderer. I hope your visit was entertaining. Though all art forms were important in Greek culture, none had the same prestige as theater, which provided a unique experience with every performance. Is there anything else you'd like to do? Then I will leave you be. Farewell, Wanderer.